Good morning. That music was timed perfectly for 11 a.m., Molly. Congratulations on that. So we're off to a beautiful start. Welcome and good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning for our 5th annual January Strategy Summit. We've been doing this since 2020, must be by the math, which is hard to believe, but I'm excited to be here. My name is Dana Kuhnlein. I'm the program director for Reimagine Appalachia, and I'm going to start us off by walking us through a few of the basics as we get this amazing event off the ground. First, I want to thank our incredible staff, our planning team for this event, and especially Molly Updegrove for the tremendous efforts of pulling this event together. We have 18 sessions, more than 60 speakers, and more than 600 people registered. So a massive thank you to our speakers, our planning team, our staff, and everyone who lent their wisdom, time, and frequently patience to help make this event possible. And I'm predicting it run completely smoothly with absolutely no hiccups. So we know that your time and your attention is one of your most precious resources, and I'm so honored that you're sharing it with us. I also want to acknowledge all the hard and terrible things that are happening today that pull us away from this space. I'm thinking of folks in California dealing with wildfires, folks who in Appalachia who were hit by flooding and are still in recovery. We know about the grief and trauma that comes with natural disasters, but I will say studies have shown, and my own life experience has shown, that in times of crisis, it's healthy and healing to come together as a community and to do productive work for a better world together. So we hope folks are taking it easy and taking the time that we need, but I'm also glad that you're here together with us to work and plan for a cleaner and safer future. And even as we hold the weight of the world, we all know that shared burdens are lighter. So we're in coalition, we're doing this together. And this is where I reveal my secret, which is that I was a poetry major. And so I'm going to drop a poem in the chat that is kind of about that message, but I'm not reading it to you. So you're welcome. And shout out to all the humanities majors who were told they were wasting their time. Because without us, you'd have no poems. Anyway, so speaking of the weight of the world and the work before us, we want to thank our sponsors for their support, as well as for all the incredible work that they do in the region. We're so honored that you have shared some of your resources with us to help make this event possible, and you can read more about them in our agenda, which should be linked, and we'll link again in a bit. If you haven't, I guess if you found us, you probably know where the agenda is, but I'm gonna just drop that in there for you. And a special thanks to the Benedum Foundation, which has served West Virginia and Southwestern Pennsylvania for over 80 years with a particular focus on education, economic development, health, and community development. We really appreciate your support and commitment to the region. So this is a 2-day event. Today we're opening with 2 panels. We'll move into breakouts. We'd love for you to join us tomorrow. You can, again, read more about the programming in our agenda document. If you have any questions about how the event will run, how to participate, please share those in the chat, and our tech support will help you get squared away. A couple quick housekeeping notes. The event is being live streamed to Facebook as well as recorded. We are pretty meticulous about notes and recordings of all sessions, and those will be available on our website after the event. And all registrants, which is you, if you're here, you registered, if you registered with your correct email, you will receive an email with those after the event. If you'd like to enable closed captioning because people like me talk too quickly, you can look to the bottom of your screen. Hopefully you'll see the word captions or the 3 little dots, and you should be able to choose the language that you would like your captions in. And if you haven't already, introduce yourselves in the chat. So a quick note about, with all that, that's our nuts and bolts. So who are we? Why are we here? We're a coalition that was born out of a broad recognition that the economy has not been working for most people and places in Appalachia. And our hope is to bring together diverse stakeholders to strategize together on how we can build a 21st century economy that's good for workers, communities, and the environment. So that's a lot about us. As we're opening up the day, we want to hear a little bit about you and why you're joining us and some of the hopes for the year. So we're going to move into a Mentimeter poll. Um, if you haven't been to a Reimagine event, then what you don't know is that we love Mentimeter polls, and we'll probably do those in the breakout room as well. And so in the chat, I've just shared a link, and if you click on that link and you go to that page, then your answer will come up on the screen that's being shared. So if you could do that, there it is again in the chat. You can also go to menti.com and put in the code. So this is both good practice for our breakout sessions later, many of which will have one of these polls. So the question that we're asking you as we start is, what are your top priorities for support and collaboration for 2025? Subtitle, how can we help each other? Where do you think we can make progress? Where do you expect difficulties where collaboration and increased support will make your organization and your work stronger and more resilient? Where do we need to collaborate to create new partnerships to adapt to the changing environment that we know we're going to have? And how can coalitions like Reimagine Appalachia and all of the amazing other partnerships and coalitions in the region work together to make a more strategic contribution? So, basically, how can we help each other? That's the question. And I see those beautiful answers coming in, and I'm going to hand it over to Amanda to talk a little bit more about Reimagine as we're watching those roll in.
Right. So, why are we here today? We come together at the start of every single year as a coalition of diverse stakeholders in order to find common ground, remember our common humanity, create a collective vision for a more sustainable, equitable Appalachia, and then to figure out together the work we need to do to get from where we are to where we need to go. And in 2025, this work may be more needed and important than ever. The question on all our minds is, where do we go from here? Given the changes at the federal level, how do we continue to make progress towards the things we care about: sustainable infrastructure, good union jobs, pathways out of poverty for disadvantaged communities? Of course, no one person has the answers to all these questions, but the 2025 Strategy Summit is designed to create space for the dialogue needed to begin finding answers and chart a path forward. We will start with two panels of thought leaders to help us get the conversation started and provide us with food for thought. Then we will move into breakout sessions to have facilitated conversation in all our key areas of work. We encourage your active participation. But we will be recording the panels, taking extensive notes, saving the chats, and we use all this information then to inform the 2025 strategy and work plan for the coalition. I personally try to read through all the notes. So be prepared to listen to diverse perspectives, but also to share your own. Put your thinking caps on and join us in coming together to figure out where the work is to get us going forward. Um, and we My theory of organizing is that the more input we have into our collective action plan, the better it will be, and the more folks that should be hopefully ready, willing, and able to join the effort towards a common goal and a more unified voice with collective leverage. Okay. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the amazing Natalia Rudiak, Reimagine's Special Projects Director, to get us started with our first panel of super smart people discussing public investment in a changing environment.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Welcome, everybody. I am thrilled to have you all here at our 5th annual summit. This is our biggest and best yet. We have over 600 people registered today, and if you don't see your friends here, get them on board. Get them on board this train because it's about to leave the station. I especially want to highlight and thank our local government practitioners and partners for joining us on day one of this event. In our changing federal landscape, local governments are more important than ever in championing our sustainable economic development work. For folks who may not know, I actually am a two-term, 8-year city council person in the city of Pittsburgh. And I know this firsthand that for local government, sustainable economic development means shoring up our tax bases through new investments, saving money through energy efficiency and clean energy transition, fixing up main streets and putting honest people to work. And that's what Reimagine Appalachia is about. And we count local governments as critical partners in this effort. And as they say, all politics is local. And our federal government has been doing its part to complement all things local. The bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act are the two most important vehicles for federal local partnerships and transformation. Policies like building in domestic content requirements are growing sustainable manufacturing in small towns across the rural Ohio River Valley. Apprenticeship and prevailing wage requirements are building pathways out of poverty. And we cannot overstate the importance of the federal government providing direct pay for clean energy transformation to city halls, churches, and nonprofit buildings. But we've reached a point where we need to project our stories and our truths. We need to show what we've accomplished and the dreams we still have to accomplish. So if I can wax philosophical for one moment, I appreciate the moment to do so. So I was actually on a prep call with our panelists, and I was struck by a simple shift of words and how they impacted the conversation that we were having. And I hope I'm not stealing anybody's thunder here. And if I am, then it doesn't hurt to say it multiple times. One of our panelists described a federal policy as nonpartisan rather than bipartisan, and it really got me thinking. Bipartisan is typically about the cooperation of parties that usually oppose each other's policies, but some things should not really be taken as leaning one way politically or the other. Some things are our rights as American citizens, and nonpartisan governing is a hallmark of local governments. A pricey heating bill shouldn't be partisan. Neither should a low-cost sustainable solution, nor a falling bridge, nor a sustainable paycheck, family-sustaining wage, or a park. All infrastructure is local, and it's our mayors, council members, township supervisors, and county commissioners who struggle firsthand with the devastating impact of catastrophic weather events as we're seeing today, aging infrastructure, failing electric grids, absentee corporations, and declining tax bases. And they understand that these are nonpartisan issues. And the best offense is that those who have power in their hands can keep momentum going, and local governments have that power. I also want to say that in addition to our plenary here, where we'll be talking about the shifting landscape of federal funding, we'll be having another plenary around multi-municipal partnerships, because local elected officials are uniquely positioned to understand that economic, environmental, and public health challenges are bigger than our municipal borders, and we need big dreams and bigger solutions. I'm actually going to touch on a couple of our breakout sessions because I'm personally one of these people that hears things better sometimes than I read them. So at 1A, we'll be talking about Appalachian made products and procurement policies to buy them, what we're calling the Purchasing with a Purpose campaign. At session 1B, we'll be talking about Appalachian flooding policies and priorities. At 1C, we'll be talking about local government readiness to take advantage of existing and new investment opportunities. At 1D, we'll be talking about communicating to a broad audience in order to build support for sustainable development, that is crafting messages about this type of development and what could potentially be a strained political environment. And finally, at session 1E, which we're calling the solar panel, we obviously couldn't help it, we'll be talking about policies for expanding solar in our communities. And all of these are designed with the local government practitioner in mind. But if you are not a local government practitioner, I'm sure you have voted in your last election or know someone who is. And all of these are useful for frankly, all of us community development practitioners out there. But back to the panel at hand, we have public investment in a changing environment. And I cannot wait to introduce our panelists, all of whom have a bird's eye view of tying all of these themes together. With us today, we have Brian Anderson, Senior Advisor to the Undersecretary for Infrastructure in the U.S. Department of Energy, Executive Director of the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization. That was a bit too long to put as his title, so we just put IWG. We also have Donna Gambrell, President and CEO of Appalachian Community Capital, Matt Ward, co-founder and CEO of Sustainable Strategies DC, and Heidi Binko, co-founder and CEO of the Just Transition Fund. I can't think of a better group of people to kick off our summit. And as Melissa Cropper, president of the Ohio Federation of Teachers and the Ohio AFL Secretary Treasurer, recently said, labor has been forged through struggle. Whatever happens, we'll make our way through it and we'll come out stronger on the other end. And on that note, I'll pass it over to Brian from the IWG.
Well, Natalia, thanks very much. And, one of the topic we're going to talk about today is, coming up with sustainable investment strategies, sustainable strategies for Appalachia. And many of the listeners here today are probably familiar with the IWG, but many of you might not be. And so just to give you a little bit of a background on what we do and what we are, we're a collection of 11 federal agencies focused singularly on making sure that energy communities that have had coal mines or coal plants close, can see a bright economic future and a sustainable future. So the alignment between what we try to do across our 11 federal agencies and Reimagine Appalachia and the summit could not be overstated. And so we were established by executive order of the Biden administration. Originally, it was the executive order on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, Section 218, established us. But fast forward through the work that we've done and Congress, in a nonpartisan way, as you said, Natalia, Congress has given us a budget and a markup for the coming year because what we are doing is seen as nonpartisan or bipartisan. And so if over the last 3.5, 4 years, we've made a lot of progress. We've put the agencies, these 11 federal agencies, together in what we call a whole of government approach, but more so creating ties across the federal government that haven't existed before, specifically around making sure that communities all across Appalachia, energy communities all across Appalachia, see this bright economic future, and done in a way that also protects the environment for sure. We've awarded more than $54 billion in federal investments across the energy communities across the whole country. The majority is actually in the Appalachian region because that's where more energy communities are than across the rest of the country. But the $54 billion has also been followed on by $315 billion in private sector investments so far over the last 4 years. Specifically, we're targeting what are 25 priority energy communities. You can go back to an original report to the president, and you can see those 25. But that was based on the communities that were hardest hit, or potentially the hardest hit. So we've seen a lot of success over the last few years. We've launched 7 what are called rapid response teams. These rapid response teams take the 11 agency whole of government approach that I mentioned before and make it hyper local, make it very focused on a specific geography, bringing those 11 agencies together to meet with community leaders, to bring it local. Like you said, politics are local, but bring it to where there is a resource for a county commissioner, there's a resource for a local economic development district, and the organization across all these agencies is really focused geographically. Now, when I tick off the rapid response teams, you'll see our focus on Appalachia, because rapid response teams are in Wyoming and the Four Corners region. They're in the southern Illinois, western Kentucky, Illinois coal basin. And then they're Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and eastern Kentucky, and soon to come, southwestern Virginia and Montana. And so you can see that what we've done is put this resource, these rapid response teams, local. We've engaged with about 13,000 stakeholders on the ground to understand what the challenges are, everything from sewer and water systems to acid mine drainage that needs to be cleaned up, to historic legacy environmental pollution that we need to clean up to create an economic future, and and we've listened over the last 4 years. Now, of course, the title of this panel is looking under uncertainty. I'm paraphrasing it, and there is uncertainty abounding because, as I mentioned, we were established by executive order, but it has been proven and seen that the work of the interagency working group, the work embedded in the agencies, the rapid response teams is all sustainable. It's all has staying power, and we're going to keep doing the work. The federal funding opportunities, they didn't happen overnight. Certainly, Bill and IRA were once in a lifetime opportunities. But when we started back 4 years ago, we found $39 billion in annual appropriations that was really accessible and applicable to communities all across Appalachia. That $39 billion, those annual approps, they don't go away. This is everything from the great work of the Appalachian Regional Commission. It's the work of the USDA with great programs and lots of even loan programs. It's the abandoned mine land programs within the Department of Interior, within the Department of Energy. There's a lot of continuing work in technical assistance. And just to highlight that, and one last highlight, and I'll toss it over to our fellow panelists as we'll have a nice conversation. Just today, I want to draw everyone's attention to it. Just today, EPA announced a technical assistance program that is closing on February 28th to provide technical assistance to 3 energy communities. If you go to the EPA's website, we can drop a link in the chat. But that work is still going on, and looking at the wordle on the screen earlier. There's a lot of focus on capacity building and partnerships and cooperation and collaboration. And the IWG is committed. We're going to help in all of those specific areas. We'll continue to be a resource for you in Appalachia and communities. And knowing that revitalizing and strengthening economies of coal, oil, and gas power plant communities, it really receives strong support across the political spectrum. So in that vein, you here on this call are really important voices in what is a pretty timely policy conversation. So excited to dig in more. Hope I didn't go too long, but really want to set the stage that we have a lot of momentum. And as I have said at the Just Transition Fund convening earlier or late last year, we've been pushing on the boulder for a few years, and we feel that boulder moving. We feel the momentum. We feel energized in energy communities all around the country. And if that boulder's rolling, the last thing you want to do is stop momentum. So we're going to keep pushing and keep that momentum going. So thanks, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Brian. Right on time. So next we'll move on to Donna Gambrell.
Natalia, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Go. Great. Thank you so much. What a pleasure it is to be here today. I really appreciate the invitation. And I am always just so impressed with the work that Reimagine Appalachia is doing. And I think just in the name itself, the reimagining part is an indication that we are constantly looking at ways that we do our work well, but also looking at approaches for things that need to be done differently. So I'm here today to talk about the work that Appalachian Community Capital is doing, and in particular in the renewable energy space as well. So a little bit about Appalachian Community Capital. We are a regional community development financial institution, or a CDFI, with a really specific mission that's no different from the other 1,500 CDFIs that are across the country, and that is to support underserved, hard-hit communities, particularly in those areas where the communities have identified priorities. And for Appalachian Community Capital, that means that our primary focus has been on small business lending, small business financing for the past 11, almost 12 years now, since we were formed in 2013. We are a membership organization. There are about 40 members. These are, again, CDFIs and other mission-based organizations throughout Appalachia. And these member institutions actually use our capital, whether it's lending capital or grant capital, to increase small business lending, to strengthen those small business owners who may need business advisory services and other types of resources. The members that we have within our portfolio have been in operation for more than 20 years, and some even longer than that. And their affiliates manage over $2 billion in assets supporting economic development in Appalachia. So late last year, we had the extreme pleasure and opportunity to launch the Green Bank for Rural America, which is a very ambitious initiative to provide public and private capital that enables rural areas to gain the most benefit from the new energy economy. So beginning with a $500 million award from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the Green Bank is set to drive new and renewed economic opportunity in Appalachia and in targeted rural communities across rural America. So we have within that coalition not only community lenders that are in the region, but also other partners across the country, including national partners that are working in and supporting rural opportunities across the country. In addition to this EPA award, though, we're also raising additional funds to bring even more private, philanthropic, and public funds to Appalachia and other rural communities. So here's our mission, and I think it is a mission that we carry on our shoulders every day, because I think we are so committed to working in the region and to working across the country in rural communities to make sure that those communities continue to grow and thrive. We understand that rural communities have long been at the heart of energy production in this country, powering the growth of our nation, and we really aim to build upon that tradition by helping rural communities gain the most benefit from the new energy economy and to not be left behind. So to that end, well, we provide capital and technical assistance awards that enable local public and nonprofit lenders in Appalachia, and again in other targeted communities across the country, to invest in a wide range of new energy projects in their own rural communities. And we do this, and we are doing this through community lenders. These are often nonprofit lenders, CDFIs, and other entities that will be required to spend a portion of their awards on community engagement and workforce development. These are two very critical pillars of our initiative, and we understand that you can certainly have capital, but you need the community engagement, and that has always been at our forefront, is making sure that we hear the voices of persons who are in the community, understanding what their priorities are, but also understanding the challenges. And of course, workforce development is a critical piece of that pillar as well. We know that those are going to be critical for our success, for the success of this program. So I'm going to ask if I have two slides, short slides today. I just want to highlight what we are focused on, and we're going to pull that up on the screen today. So again, the Green Bank for Rural America is focused on three important parts of community restoration, revitalization. And that is, again, providing public and private capital that enables rural communities to gain the most benefit from the new energy economy. And we are focused on three main priorities. Number one, creating good jobs that stay in rural communities and helping local communities thrive. Number two, helping families and businesses save and build wealth and increase profitability, creating a prosperous future. And number three, making sure, again, that we are creating healthier communities that preserve the life, the quality of life, the culture, the history, in so many rural areas that we serve through our members, as well as those other partners in other parts of the country as well. The next slide, please. One more slide to that. But if that's not coming up, I can talk. I can talk from it. So with the Green Bank for Rural America, again, a $500 million award was provided to ACC. We plan to deploy about $400 million of that $500 million to community lenders for projects over the next several years in the areas that I described earlier in Appalachia, as well as targeted rural communities across the country. The total, oh, here we go. The total project cost will be about $1.6 billion, and we intend to leverage that capital 3 times over to ensure that additional investments are being made as a result of our initial participation. That means at the bottom of the screen here, you can see in the green that we are anticipating that there are going to be about 2,000 projects financed, about 13,000 jobs created, 4,000 people trained, about 4.8 thousand units of housing developed or rehabilitated. We will see energy generation of about 460 megawatts and about a reduction of about 850,000 annual tons of harmful CO2 emissions that will be reduced as a result of our work. Those are the 2 slides that I wanted to say. But I think it's also important when you look at the numbers, what's so important about the work that we are doing with our partners, of course, is really the stories. It's the impact that we know that we can have, the impact that we know our partners are already experiencing. And so just one quick example of that is the Hemp Hill Community Center that's located in Kentucky. It's a gathering place for music and dance and art workshops and community resources. And the center has reinvigorated a former coal camp in Lecter County, Kentucky, bringing new opportunities to the county's 20,000 residents, including the Black Sheep Bakery, which is providing wonderful baked goods and employment opportunities for people in recovery. In 2019, the center found itself at risk of closing their doors due to rising energy costs. And through a partnership with ACC member and a trusted community lender, Mountain Association, that has been doing this hard work day in and day out for decades, the center turned to solar power to reduce energy costs and generate good jobs. The team at Mountain Association, and I know that several of them are on the call today, facilitated energy audits and energy sufficiency upgrades and financed the $480,500 of solar installation. Since adding solar, and here's I think the key that we try to keep at the forefront when we talk about the projects that are happening in our communities. Since adding solar, Hemp Hill now saves nearly $7,000 a year on their electric bills. They're now talking about expanding their solar capacity and adding battery storage for resiliency in the face of future power outages and flooding. And so again, we love the stories because the stories combined with the data really show the power of the community. Natalia talked about this at the very beginning. So much of the work that's being done is being driven by those who are living in the communities day in and day out, who understand what the priorities are, understand what the needs are, and are taking the steps forward to make sure that we're moving to this new economy and being an integral part of all that's going to be happening, I think, in communities across this country. So thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about and boast about the work that our partners are doing. Natalia.
Thank you so much. And I will also say that if anybody has any questions along the way, you can feel free to put them in the chat and we can either try to answer them along the way or ask our panelists at the end. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt Ward from Sustainable Strategies DC.
Thanks, Natalia. Good morning, friends. It is a pleasure to be with you all. And what an honor to share this time with Reimagine Appalachia and with this great group of panelists that we're here with. Matt Ward of Sustainable Strategies DC. I work in Washington, DC, but I grew up in West Virginia and lived there with my family. My firm has worked with dozens of local communities in the Appalachia region to secure resources for revitalization and tools for progress in the green economy. Speaking of resources, the topic of this panel, 4 years ago, this organization, Reimagine Appalachia, created a blueprint for federal investment in the region, and that vision has been launched and is rocketing forward all over, as we're hearing. But now is a time to reimagine again, huh? We are in for a change with a president with perhaps unparalleled power in modern times, coming with a clear view about renewable energy, clean fuel vehicles, and the role of the federal government on domestic policy and investment. He has united his party behind the idea of a massive tax cut package and a wholesale change in energy policy. And he has the world's richest, weirdest man leading a shadow government to use the Department of Government Efficiency to cut $2 trillion from the domestic budget, or maybe 1 trillion, like you said last week, but who's counting? And so the question is whether, over the last 6 presidential transitions since I came in right at the beginning of Clinton Gore, I've told clients that things change, some programs get rebranded, some things shrink, some things grow, but the steady onward march of federal agencies and federal programs normally continues. But will it be different this time? The question is whether the Congress and the FY25 federal spending bill that needs to get done by March, and whether the FY26 federal spending bill that will emerge in the fall, and the big Trump legislative package, including a giant tax bill that will kick off this tax cut bill that's going to kick off this spring, will they seek to cut $1 trillion out of the domestic budget with a machete? Or will we be smarter than that? And we don't know, and time will tell soon, right? But the question for this panel that we're discussing is, what can all of us do to navigate this course when we're trying to move Appalachia to a thriving economy that stewards our wonderful resources in a sustainable way, and in a way that supports the poor and disadvantaged people in struggling communities? So I am optimistic that we have already reached escape velocity on building a clean energy and sustainable economy. Look, the Obama Recovery Act, passed in 2009, was a time when only 140,000 electric vehicles were bought in America annually. In 2024, it's 10 times that amount, it's 20% of the market, and it's growing. In 2009, the cost of solar installations was 3 times more expensive than it is today. Of course, the fuel is still free. Well, you know what? This came out of the Obama Recovery Act changing and tipping the markets. And all of that legislation amounted to only about $30 billion in the green stuff at the federal level, right? Now look at the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Different ways you could count all that. Not all of it has gotten out of the door, but we are talking about something like $1 trillion for green stuff, with trillions more in private sector leverage loading on top. So that fuel for sustainability is already out there. It is making red states and red districts better places. It is diversifying economies and creating jobs. That fuel will surely rocket the green and clean energy economy forward into an escape velocity that will be very difficult to stop, even if you think that windmills are driving whales crazy. So, the next point is that local governments and local community leaders are so essential and important to this endeavor. I'm so glad that Reimagine has brought so many of them in. It was the mayors and county executives and city council members and state reps who learned and preached the gospel on the climate crisis and the need for greener approaches in our communities. It is those local people who have brought us through some of the darkest days of national political opposition to sustainable development. Now is not the time for local leaders to shrink. but instead to stand taller for the propositions that green buildings, clean fuel and cost-saving fleets, local solar roofs, green infrastructure, and Appalachian-made manufacturing jobs in these sectors is what our people need and intend to pursue. Local leaders need to talk with your members of Congress and their staff in both your district and in Washington, D.C., to help them understand these opportunities and benefits and to ask them for their support. We need to rebrand our language to make the case and spread the news. In Wayne County, West Virginia, the firm Solar Holler, the state's leader in solar deployments, is partnered with Wayne County schools to solarize every school building in that county with 10,000 solar panels producing 5.4 megawatts of power by the end of this year. And you know how Solar Holler and Wayne County talks about this? They say they're saving a poor school system $6.5 million, which means the salaries of 2 teachers every year. That's how they talk about it, and it's tough to argue with the branding of that project. We need to rebrand. I would also urge you to create clear and discrete local projects, sustainable local projects, to put together a resource roadmap that identifies the specific federal resources that can help you accomplish those local projects, and to put that all into a one-page briefing sheet. You know, front and back is fine, but no staples, and to spread that briefing sheet on your local projects and the help it needs to everybody that matters, so that they understand what your locality is trying to do, how it will make these places better, why the resources are important, and how they can help if they want to be part of local progress for their constituents. I'm going to, when I'm done speaking, going to drop into a link, into the chat, a link on how to do a resource roadmap, and another one about how to use briefing sheets for funding advocacy that I put together with the EPA Brownfields office and that are also online. So at the Appalachian regional level, like today, let's stay strong in support of what groups like Reimagine Appalachia, the Just Transition Fund, Appalachian Community Capital, and all of you are doing. Let's build and work in coalition. Let's engage new constituencies, including our youth, and let's bring clean energy, innovation, and investment into the heartland of Appalachia. What we're doing was easy when the Biden administration was throwing massive amounts of grants around, and we are grateful. But now what you are doing, what we are doing, is going to be more important than ever. I will close by saying that I'm really looking forward to seeing the band Dead and Company with my best friend in April, and seeing Pearl Jam in Appalachian Pittsburgh in May with my wife. So let's close with their wise words. In the song The Long Road, Pearl Jam says, "And the wind are rolling, and the sky keeps turning gray, and the sun is set, and the sun will rise another day." And as Jerry Garcia tells us, we will get by, we will survive. But more importantly, once in a while, you can get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at it right. So you're shining light on this Reimagine Appalachia. Let's get the wind rolling. Let's seek the light of community revitalization in Appalachia, and let's just keep trucking on. Thank you.
Love it, Matt. Thank you so much. Really interesting information, particularly about some of the ways that communities can prepare themselves for this and future funding. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi Binko, co-founder and CEO of Just Transition Fund. Welcome.
Hey, Natalia and Dana, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm super excited to be with you, and it's kind of great to start the morning thinking about the Grateful Dead. So thanks for that, Matt. That was really great. So today, Natalia and Dana asked me to talk about a few things, and I'm going to kind of pivot to be a little bit more specific than the previous speakers, but I also kind of want to maybe have us start at a higher level level, just to sort of set the context a little bit. So I want to do three specific things today. First, I want to say a little bit more about what we at the JTF think that we all can expect from the next administration. Number two, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the strategies that we think will be most impactful given the changing political landscape. And then three, I want to leave you with the specific opportunities that all of you, particularly local economic development nonprofits and local government leaders, can find from the JTF specifically. So those are the three things I'm going to cover in the 5 minutes. And Natalia, if I go long, feel free to just, shut me off. So before I get started, just a few words for those of you who don't know me or the Just Transition Fund. I started the Just Transition Fund with my partner in 2015. And it was really in response to President Obama's Power Initiative, which was the first time that federal funding was ever made available to help coal communities undergoing transition. And at that time, there was, I think it was like $35 million for energy communities in that first go round. So, we've really come a long way since then. At the JTF, we are working to try to create economic opportunity. That's our big goal in the nation's hardest hit coal communities. So we are national fund. And we do that through two primary strategies. One, we help communities access federal funds and submit more competitive applications. And number two, we help make sure that local economic development leaders are informing both state and federal policy. So access and advocate are the strategies by which we realize our economic goals. In the last 10 years since we've been around, we've helped drive, actually just in the last couple of years, we've helped drive $2.5 billion into local communities, and we've reached 63% of the hardest hit coal communities across the country. So I'm really proud of the work, and Natalie is here with me today, and she'll be in the chat if any of you have any questions. Okay, so getting to the details, first thing is, what can we expect? And I want to start out by saying that I'm cautiously optimistic. If you look at the voters who supported the Trump administration, they are all from rural America. So I think that this administration has a big mandate from rural America to make sure that they don't forget about the priorities of the people who got them there, right? And so at the JTF, we've done this work now. This is the fourth administration that we will have worked through, and we've seen a lot, we've learned a lot, and I think that we found a really great way through the Trump 1 administration to not only to keep doing this work effectively, but also found a way to increase momentum and be ready when more federal funding opportunities came available. So sort of point number one is, I think there's opportunity if we can only find it, right? So that's sort of my high level message to you. Just saying a little bit more about what I think we can expect. And all of the speakers have alluded to this in some form or fashion, but there will be federal funds to pursue, but the pool of new funds is just likely to be smaller. You heard Matt talk a lot about the wholesale change that the incoming administration is trying to undertake. And I really don't think that that's going to be possible. They're going to try to do a lot of things, but what they're going to be able actually to accomplish, I think, I don't think it's going to be possible that we're going to see the levels of change that they seek. Part of the reason is, again, the former speakers alluded to this, but more than 60% of IRA funding has flown to more conservative areas of the country, and it's having good effect on the ground. Local people are really realizing these dollars, and they're in support of them. At the JTF, what we do, and we do this every year, we do an analysis of what we call the high leverage programs that coal communities can access. So these are programs across the Economic Development Administration, USDA, DOE, EPA, even the Department of Transportation, to see what are those programs that are the most flexible, that have the biggest potential to transform local coal communities. And what we've found is that the enabling legislation of those high leverage programs, yes, IRA funds some of those, but so does CHIPS, so does bipartisan infrastructure law, so does ARPA, and so do a range of reauthorization language. So my point here is that there are threats, but there's still going to be a lot of opportunity, and we're just going to have to find those places. And then the last thing I want to emphasize on the just thinking about why optimism is that even though we're seeing, key departures and, leadership changes, I think what we all have to remember is there are an amazing number of civil servants at these agencies who stay. I mean, we work with people even today who have been there since Obama, right? So these are folks that are really dedicated to doing the work, and it's really a bright spot in this place. So federal pool of funding is going to be smaller. What is it going to look like? I don't think anybody can tell you or can tell any of us right now, right? We're going to know a lot after the inauguration. We're going to know a lot more after the first 30 days. But I think the real trick is going to be after the secretaries are confirmed, and then after they appoint leadership at these key agencies, then we're going to start to see the future of these programs. But there are some bright spots, right? I think for us at the JTF, we work on broadband, and the new incoming Chairman Guthrie of the House Commerce and Energy Committee has already talked about his support for closing the digital divide and promoting broadband across rural America. So reasons for optimism. One of the biggest reasons for optimism, and I think this leads into the second part of what I wanted to talk to you today, which are the strategies that we think we all should think about and undertake, is that we see at the JTF, we see a huge bright spot for intermediaries. So a major portion of the federal funding that was provided by the IJA and CHIPS and the IRA that has significant implications for rural community and economic development went to intermediaries, right? So those funds are already sitting with states, with tribes, and with nonprofits like Donna's Green Bank, right? So there's a significant amount of funding there that we all are going to have the opportunity to access. And that's going to be available for the next few years. States by themselves have $189 billion available for rural economic development. Even though we're going to need to think about sort of a change in strategy to replace the big high leverage federal dollars that the Biden administration has, what are the opportunities? Keep your eye on the prize with some of the existing programs, look to intermediaries, and I think also look to the private sector. So there's going to be opportunities there for what I see as application ready funds, which is what we think about at the JTF. So strategies, right? So what do we want to think about? So at the JTF, when communities are going after and trying to source investment, we think of them in 3 different stages. Those that are application ready, which is sort of what I just talked to, those that are in pre-development stages, and those that have already received those big awards, right? But just need the help that they need to really realize the really significant local economic impacts that those projects had promised, right? So we think that there's opportunity in all of those areas. Bit of a smaller federal pool, but again, opportunities with states, opportunities with intermediaries, and there's going to be huge opportunities to look at how we can continue to build the pipeline. So for example, like you've all heard about like the Act Now Coalition in West Virginia and some of the other large big dollar federal awards. That didn't happen by accident. That took years of investment by philanthropy, right, by local funders to be able to develop the capacity of those nonprofits in rural areas, right? And that's what we need now, right? And so I think there's a huge opportunity to keep doing that work. There's no need to sit and wait, right? And then also thinking about implementation strategies, right? The Act Now Coalition is a great example. They are going to depend on, they're still going to need funding for the next number of years to make sure that the economic outcomes that they promise can be realized, right? So opportunities across those 3 different strategies, if you will, as we go forward. And I'll just conclude because I know we want time for questions, but at the JTF, and again, Natalie's going to drop some information in the chat, we are dedicated to helping in a big way this year. And so look for an announcements from the JTF coming at the end of January for our Federal Access Center. We're going to keep helping communities go after the funds that are available, including going after funds from other places like states. We're going to, number 2, launch our Get Ready Challenge, which we started in 23. And that challenge is a place where we pick 10 to 15 communities across the country and make investments of about $300,000 to work with communities for a year to try to develop those big transformational economic ideas. And then lastly, we're exploring support to continue to build out the projects of those big federal award winners. So if you're doing work in any of those camps, we want to hear from you. And that's I'll end there, but again, just to, maybe just to close this out, again, at the JTF, we've done this work through 3 different administrations, and I'm cautiously optimistic because at the local level, this is about people putting food on their tables, right? This is about people trying to realize a vibrant economic future. This is about livelihoods. There is a lot of support, both among Democrats and Republicans for this work. And we've always taken the approach that this work should not be politicized, because we want to focus on the areas where we can make the most impact and on the areas where there are commonalities with communities. So looking ahead into 2025, we're excited to continue the amazing, amazing momentum that Brian referenced in his speech, and excited to answer questions and talk more about any of these details. Thanks, Natalia.
Thank you so much, Heidi. And thank you to all of our speakers for painting such an interesting picture of what we have to look forward to. There are certainly things we need to protect and defend, and hope that there's a scalpel and not a machete, correct? But also really, really amazing opportunities. We only have a couple minutes for questions, so I'm going to throw one out there that we got in the chat. And hoping that people can briefly answer this before we move on to our next panel. But one of the questions that we got is, a lot of our low capacity communities, I think, are in fear that they're still going to be left behind. And we do have some kind of language barriers, both in speaking to low income communities, but also in low income communities speaking to their federal representatives. And also we're going to have, like I said, a breakout session around communication this afternoon. So please check that out. But how can we change our language to prevent barriers to understanding and involvement as we shape federal funding?
Well, I might jump in and tell you, just specifically, one of the big letters under the Wordle was capacity and capacity building, and I mentioned the EPA technical assistance offering an opportunity right now, but I think that there is a groundswell of movement toward communities of practice, technical assistance offerings, through private philanthropy. That what we need to make sure that we do is we don't lose sight of where those resources are going. And Heidi and the JTF do a great job of being a place for energy communities to go to. But we need to now engage philanthropy even more. And there's some big national philanthropies working together with JTF and with local community foundations to keep building that technical assistance offering, and sharing of best practices. I think that that's one thing that we really need to make sure we're focusing on. And then I think there's an opportunity when it comes to looking ahead and looking forward. There are two things that I want to make sure folks see. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, yes, those funds got obligated to big projects, but their timelines are going to keep moving forward in a lot of these communities, or at least within a commuting radius of a lot of the communities that we're talking about. There's still a lot of implementation work to be done, holding the recipients of those federal funding accountable, and making sure that the benefits are felt in those communities. So we tried to build some really durable structures in community benefits plans and things like that. But I think in the very local level, working directly with the private sector folks who have received billions of dollars of federal funding to make sure that the impacts are positive in the communities is still paramount, and will be very helpful in many low-income communities too.
Thank you. Does anybody?
Brian, I just want to piggyback on your excellent points that you've made about all of the work that's being done, and clearly the partnerships. I think we have, I've worked in government for a long time. I know the value of government participation, but also the private investment that's also important. And so as part of the work that we're doing with the Green Bank for Rural America, while we are certainly grateful for the work, the funding that we receive from EPA, we also know that there are philanthropic opportunities out there that we're also pursuing and saying, look, it can't, this can't be a one size fits all initiative. We have to look at private capital as well. We're looking at ways in which we can bring in that additional private capital for those projects, especially those that may not fit neatly under the EPA playbook as well. And, as you know, there are hundreds, probably thousands within the Appalachian region and elsewhere that could also benefit from that private investment. So I'm a big proponent of both, and think we would just really need to continue to promote the work that we're doing, and continue to make the case, frankly. I was at the CDFI Fund during several changes in administration. And I don't know if you call it nonpartisan or bipartisan, but I think the key that we found, especially at the CDFI Fund, is that when you talk to local officials as well as federal officials about what's happening in their communities, and they can really see the impact and see the differences that are being made. It does resonate. It can make a difference, and I think we have to continue uh, one of the recommendations that Matt had is to continue to talk about what the work that's happening in these communities and the impact, the long-lasting impact that we're having as well.
Natalia, I know we're out of time.
Okay, 10 seconds.
I'll just say that it's so important that the Biden administration has brought in money for planning. You cannot make a project shovel ready. You cannot compete for public funding. You cannot leverage private funding. You don't know if projects are feasible. You don't even know what they cost if you don't do planning. Just as a matter of fact, the last administration was very anti-planning. I mean, every program's different, but it was very anti-planning. And so I urge philanthropy and government at every level to put money into helping undercapacity and rural communities figure out how to get a project from a concept to a shovel ready, or you'll never get it implemented.
Wonderful. Thank you. Everybody, round of applause for our speakers here today. We appreciate that. Sorry, thank you so much. We could not get to verbal questions. We hope that y'all use the chat to network amongst yourselves. I see a lot of great things happening in the chat, but please, we don't have a water cooler. We don't have a coffee station. So please use the chat for that. And we'll be taking all questions at the end of our plenary session. So we don't have time for shout outs or anything like that. But thanks again. And without further ado, we're going to move on to our next panel.